Oak Ridge Estates was the kind of neighborhood that looked perfect from every angle. Long rows of luxury homes stretched across quiet streets lined with towering oak trees. Every lawn was perfectly trimmed, every flower bed carefully arranged, and every mailbox shined as though it had just been installed. Residents proudly called it the safest community in the county, crediting its strict Homeowners Association for preserving both property values and peace of mind. Visitors often admired the spotless sidewalks, decorative streetlights, and beautifully maintained parks. Few realized that beneath the polished appearance existed an atmosphere where privacy had slowly disappeared. The HOA called it security. Many residents quietly called it surveillance. Several years earlier, the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association had approved an ambitious security initiative. Hundreds of high-definition surveillance cameras were installed throughout the neighborhood. Cameras overlooked every entrance, every exit, every park, every clubhouse, every walking trail, and nearly every intersection. The board proudly announced that the system would discourage crime while protecting homeowners. At first, everyone applauded the decision. Vehicle break-ins dropped. Packages stopped disappearing from front porches. Parents felt more comfortable allowing children to ride bicycles around the neighborhood. The cameras appeared to be doing exactly what they were designed to accomplish. But over time, something changed. The cameras were no longer being used only to prevent crime. They became tools for monitoring everyday life. Board members began reviewing footage to identify residents whose trash cans remained visible after pickup day. Families received warning letters because children played basketball after approved hours. Pet owners were fined after cameras recorded dogs briefly walking across landscaped common areas. Soon, nearly every disagreement inside Oak Ridge Estates somehow involved surveillance footage. Neighbors no longer settled minor conflicts with conversations. Instead, they demanded video reviews. The cameras saw everything. Or at least they were supposed to. At the center of the HOA stood its president, Richard Holloway. Richard had held the position for nearly 8 years. In his early 60s, he believed rules created order and that strict enforcement preserved excellence. He rarely considered whether every rule actually served the people living there. To Richard, authority justified itself. He often reminded board members that residents voluntarily accepted HOA regulations when purchasing their homes. If someone disliked the rules, they were free to live elsewhere. That philosophy had earned him loyal supporters. It had also earned him quiet resentment. Few people challenged him publicly. Most simply paid fines and moved on. Among Oak Ridge Estates' newer residents was Maya Thompson. At 34 years old, Maya had recently purchased her dream home after years of sacrifice. She worked as a successful cybersecurity consultant, often spending long hours protecting businesses from digital threats. Her career required careful attention to privacy, ethics, and responsible use of technology. Ironically, she had chosen Oak Ridge Estates believing it offered both security and tranquility. Instead, she found herself surrounded by cameras that seemed to watch every aspect of daily life. Initially, Maya dismissed her concerns. Security systems were common. Responsible communities often invested in technology. There was nothing inherently wrong with surveillance when used appropriately. Then strange incidents began occurring. Only days after moving in, she received a warning letter stating that her recycling bin had remained visible for 47 minutes beyond the approved collection time. The letter included exact timestamps. A week later, another notice arrived. According to HOA records, someone had observed guests visiting her home after 10 o'clock on a Saturday evening. The board politely reminded her that excessive nighttime gatherings could disturb neighboring residents. The gathering had consisted of her younger sister bringing over homemade dinner after working a late hospital shift. No music. No noise. No complaints. Only surveillance. The following month brought another letter. The HOA cited footage showing Maya exercising with her dog in a common green space before sunrise. Although the area remained open 24 hours a day, the board suggested that early morning activity created unnecessary liability concerns. Each notice felt increasingly intrusive. More troubling than the warnings themselves was how detailed they were. Someone wasn't merely reviewing footage after complaints. Someone appeared to be actively watching residents. Maya's professional instincts immediately recognized the danger. Technology without accountability almost always invited abuse. Still, she hesitated to draw conclusions. Perhaps she misunderstood the system. Perhaps every community functioned this way. One Saturday afternoon, she attended an HOA meeting hopping to better understand the policies. The meeting took place inside the neighborhood clubhouse. Residents filled comfortable chairs, while board members sat behind polished wooden tables, displaying neatly organized documents. Richard Holloway confidently presented reports celebrating another month, without major criminal activity. Several homeowners applauded. When public comments began, Maya respectfully asked how surveillance footage was stored, who had access to it, and what safeguards prevented misuse. The room grew noticeably quieter. Richard answered with practiced confidence. He assured everyone that the board followed appropriate procedures. Only authorized individuals reviewed footage. Everything remained secure. When Maya politely requested clarification regarding oversight, retention periods, and independent auditing, Richard smiled politely but never actually answered. Instead, he praised the neighborhood's outstanding safety record. Several residents accepted the explanation. Maya did not. Her experience in cybersecurity taught her that organizations unwilling to explain oversight often lacked meaningful oversight altogether. Questions about accountability should never make honest leaders uncomfortable. Over the following weeks, Maya paid closer attention. She noticed security cameras positioned in ways that seemed unnecessary. One overlooked a community picnic pavilion from multiple angles. Another pointed toward benches where elderly residents gathered to read. A third captured children entering the neighborhood playground. The official purpose remained security. The practical reality looked different. One evening, while walking her golden retriever through the neighborhood, Maya observed an elderly widower named Harold Simmons sitting alone on a park bench. Harold had lived in Oak Ridge Estates since the community was first built. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier. Most evenings, he quietly watched sunsets from the same bench before returning home. The following morning, Harold received an HOA notice. According to surveillance records, he had remained inside the community park beyond recommended recreational hours. The letter politely reminded him that lingering unnecessarily in common areas could discourage proper community usage. Harold stared at the notice in disbelief. He had done nothing except remember his wife beneath the evening sky. For Maya, that moment changed everything. Security had crossed into something far more invasive. Soon afterward, another unusual event caught her attention. While leaving for work before sunrise, Maya noticed an HOA maintenance employee replacing one of the surveillance cameras near the clubhouse. His equipment case remained open beside the lift. Inside, she briefly noticed several portable storage drives labeled by street names. The employee seemed nervous after realizing she had seen them. He quickly closed the case and continued working without making eye contact. The image stayed with Maya throughout the day. Why would surveillance footage be copied onto portable drives? Standard security practices rarely required such methods. The question lingered. Days later, Maya received an anonymous envelope in her mailbox. There was no return address. Inside sat a small flash drive. Attached was a handwritten note containing only one sentence. They're watching far more than they're admitting. No signature. No explanation. only the drive. Most people might have dismissed it as a prank. Maya's instincts told her otherwise. She waited until returning home before examining it on an isolated computer, specifically designed for secure analysis. The files inside immediately caught her attention. They contained short surveillance clips from around Oak Ridge estates. Families walking dogs, teenagers riding bicycles, residents unloading groceries, children playing in parks. Nothing criminal, nothing dangerous. Only ordinary people living ordinary lives. Each clip had been labeled with names, addresses, dates, and detailed behavioral notes. Some observations seemed almost unbelievable. Usually leaves home at 7:12 a.m. Frequently receives visitors on Thursdays. Walks alone after sunset. Often appears emotionally distressed. Maya's heart sank. Someone wasn't protecting the neighborhood. Someone was profiling it. As she continued reviewing the files, one final folder appeared. Unlike the others, it required an additional password. The folder's title consisted of only 2 words. Board access. Maya stared at the screen. Whatever existed behind that encrypted folder clearly wasn't meant for ordinary residents to discover. Outside her window, another surveillance camera quietly rotated toward the street, continuing its silent observation as the neighborhood settled into another peaceful evening. Unaware that someone had finally begun uncovering the truth, the people responsible for Oak Ridge Estate's surveillance system continued believing their secrets remained perfectly hidden. By the time Maya discovered what lay inside that final folder, the scandal would threaten not only the HOA leadership, but the very future of the community itself. Maya Thompson barely slept that night. The encrypted folder sat open on her isolated computer, its password prompt glowing silently in the darkness of her home office. Throughout her career in cybersecurity, she had learned that information was rarely dangerous by itself. What mattered was how people chose to use it. The anonymous flash drive had already revealed something deeply unsettling. Someone inside the Oak Ridge Estate's Homeowners Association had been collecting detailed behavioral profiles on ordinary residents. The surveillance cameras were no longer serving their advertised purpose of preventing crime. They had become instruments for observing private routines, documenting harmless habits, and building files on families who believed they were simply living their lives. The password-protected folder suggested something even more disturbing. Maya refused to guess. Instead, she carefully examined the drive itself. Every file carried identical timestamps and formatting. The information appeared to originate from the HOA's central surveillance server rather than from random copies. Whoever had created the archive possessed administrator-level access. That meant one thing. The abuse wasn't accidental. It was organized. Using professional forensic techniques, Maya recovered deleted metadata hidden within the drive. Buried inside were fragments of system logs revealing usernames, access histories, and backup schedules. One username appeared repeatedly. R. Holloway. Another belonged to the HOA's property manager. A third belonged to someone Maya had never met. Calvin Mercer. According to public HOA documents, Calvin served as the neighborhood's contracted technology consultant, responsible for maintaining security infrastructure. His name appeared beside nearly every export operation. The evidence suggested that surveillance footage wasn't simply being stored. It was being copied, categorized, shared. The discovery transformed Maya's concern into determination. Before taking any action, she needed proof strong enough to survive scrutiny. Accusations without evidence would only allow the board to dismiss her as another unhappy homeowner. The following morning, life inside Oak Ridge Estates continued as though nothing had changed. Children waited for school buses. Gardeners trimmed hedges. Delivery drivers stopped at elegant front porches. Residents waved politely to one another, while surveillance cameras quietly followed nearly every movement. Few people ever looked up anymore. The cameras had become part of the scenery, invisible through familiarity. Later that afternoon, Maya visited Harold Simmons. The elderly widower welcomed her warmly into his modest home. Photographs of his late wife decorated nearly every room. Decades of shared memories filled the shelves. Harold admitted that the HOA's warning letter had hurt far more than he initially acknowledged. After losing his wife, watching sunsets in the neighborhood park had become his way of feeling close to her. The bench overlooked the same horizon they had admired together for years. The notice made him feel as though even grief required permission. Maya quietly asked whether similar incidents had happened before. Harold slowly opened a kitchen drawer. Inside rested a stack of HOA violation notices. Each one cited surveillance footage. One accused him of leaving his garage door open for 32 minutes. Another documented that visitors had remained parked outside his home longer than expected. A third criticized him for placing bird feeders too close to a common area. Every letter included precise times, exact camera references, detailed observations. Harold hadn't argued. He simply paid the fines. Living alone had taught him to avoid unnecessary conflict. Maya carefully photographed every notice with Harold's permission. One resident's experience could be dismissed. Years of documented surveillance patterns could not. Word slowly spread that Maya had begun asking questions. Several homeowners quietly contacted her. Each story sounded strangely familiar. A young mother received warnings because neighborhood cameras recorded her children drawing with sidewalk chalk. A nurse working overnight shifts received repeated notices questioning vehicles parked outside during daytime sleeping hours. A retired veteran had been fined after cameras observed him repairing his own fence without prior architectural approval. Individually, each incident appeared minor. Together, they revealed a troubling culture. The cameras had evolved into instruments of control rather than protection. One evening, Maya received another anonymous message. This time it arrived through encrypted email. There was no greeting, no signature, only one sentence. Meet behind the maintenance building at 8:30 tomorrow night. Ordinarily, Maya would never trust an anonymous request. Yet every instinct told her someone inside the system wanted the truth exposed. The next evening arrived with steady rain. Dark clouds covered the neighborhood as Maya quietly walked toward the maintenance facility located behind the clubhouse. The building normally housed landscaping equipment and electrical supplies. At precisely 8:30, a man stepped from the shadows. He appeared nervous, constantly glancing toward nearby cameras. His name was Calvin Mercer, the same technology consultant whose account appeared throughout the system logs. Calvin had maintained Oak Ridge, a state surveillance network, for nearly 5 years. When the project began, he genuinely believed he was helping create a safer community. The original design included strict access controls, automatic deletion schedules, and privacy protections. Those safeguards disappeared shortly after Richard Holloway demanded broader access. Board members insisted they needed unrestricted authority to enforce neighborhood regulations. Calvin objected repeatedly. Eventually, he stopped arguing. The board approved expanded privileges anyway. Over time, requests became increasingly inappropriate. Richard ordered footage reviewed whenever residents complained about neighbors. Certain homeowners requested recordings involving personal disputes. Behavioral reports became routine. Eventually, board members began watching people simply because they were curious. Calvin had grown increasingly uncomfortable. When he threatened resignation, Richard reminded him that confidentiality agreements protected HOA operations. Calvin remained silent. Until now, Unable to live with the growing abuse, he secretly copied evidence before contacting Maya. He explained that the encrypted folder contained archived board communications, documenting how surveillance footage had been intentionally misused. Meeting notes, internal emails, unauthorized viewing logs, private discussions, mocking residents whose personal routines had become entertainment during board meetings. Calvin handed Maya another encrypted storage device. This one contained complete server backups. He warned her that Richard would likely erase everything if he suspected an investigation. Maya thanked him before leaving separately to avoid attracting attention. Back home, she examined the new evidence. What she discovered exceeded her worst expectations. Board members had reviewed footage unrelated to security hundreds of times. Camera recordings captured children's birthday parties. Private family celebrations held in backyards visible from common area cameras. Residents embracing grieving relatives after funerals. Teenagers practicing for school performances. None of it involved criminal activity. Yet all of it had been accessed. Several internal messages revealed board members joking about homeowners' daily routines. One even suggested increasing fines against residents considered difficult. Another recommended using surveillance records during HOA election campaigns to discredit opponents. Security had become power. Power had become abuse. As Maya organized the evidence, she noticed one final document. It scheduled the upcoming monthly HOA board meeting. Hidden beneath the agenda appeared another confidential item. Approve expanded AI behavioral monitoring. The proposal included plans to install facial recognition software capable of automatically tracking residents throughout the neighborhood. Maya stared at the page in disbelief. The surveillance program wasn't ending. It was about to become far more invasive. She realized the upcoming board meeting represented the community's last opportunity to stop it before irreversible changes occurred. Outside, rain continued falling across Oak Ridge Estates. The cameras remained fixed upon every street, every sidewalk, every entrance, unaware that the truth had finally reached someone capable of exposing it. Richard Holloway confidently prepared for the meeting that he believed would strengthen the HOA's authority forever. Instead, it would become the day his entire system began collapsing. The monthly HOA board meeting drew the largest crowd Oak Ridge Estates had seen in years. Residents filled every chair inside the clubhouse long before the meeting officially began. Others stood along the walls while late arrivals gathered outside the open doors, hopping to hear what would unfold. Most had attended expecting another routine discussion about landscaping budgets, architectural approvals, and neighborhood maintenance. Few realized they were about to witness the collapse of a system that had quietly controlled their lives for years. At precisely 7 o'clock, Richard Holloway walked confidently to the front of the room. Everything appeared normal. The board members arranged their binders neatly across the polished table. A projector displayed the evening's agenda. Refreshments rested on a side counter as neighbors exchanged polite greetings. Richard welcomed everyone with the same practiced confidence he had displayed for years. He praised Oak Ridge Estates for maintaining one of the lowest crime rates in the county. He celebrated rising property values and congratulated residents for supporting the HOA's security initiatives. Several people applauded. Many did not. The atmosphere felt different. Questions lingered beneath the surface. When routine business concluded, Richard introduced the final agenda item. The proposal recommended upgrading the neighborhood surveillance system with artificial intelligence capable of recognizing faces, tracking movement patterns, and automatically flagging what the software considered unusual behavior. According to the presentation, the technology would improve neighborhood safety while reducing manual monitoring. The proposal sounded impressive. It also promised something deeply unsettling. Every resident's daily routine would become permanently searchable. Before Richard could request a vote, Maya Thompson quietly stood. She carried a small laptop and a folder containing carefully organized documents. The room grew silent. Richard politely acknowledged her request to speak, assuming she intended to ask another technical question. Instead, Maya calmly requested permission to connect her computer to the projector. Richard hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. He remained confident. He believed the HOA had nothing to hide. Within seconds, the projector screen changed. Instead of architectural plans, the audience saw internal system logs from the HOA surveillance network. Rows of dates, usernames, camera locations, and access records filled the screen. At first, the information appeared highly technical. Then Maya began explaining it in simple language. She showed how surveillance footage had been accessed hundreds of times without any reported criminal activity. She demonstrated that cameras intended for security had routinely been used to monitor ordinary residents going about their daily lives. She displayed records proving that footage had been reviewed simply because homeowners received visitors, walked through parks, exercised outdoors, or spent quiet evenings on community benches. Whispers spread throughout the room. Confused expressions slowly transformed into disbelief. Maya continued. She revealed archived reports describing residents' personal routines in extraordinary detail. Wake-up times, walking schedules, visitor patterns, exercise habits, private family gatherings. None of it related to neighborhood safety. Everything had been documented. Several homeowners immediately recognized their own addresses. Others recognized descriptions of their families. The room became uncomfortably quiet. Richard attempted to interrupt. He insisted the records had been misunderstood. He argued that occasional reviews supported effective community management. Maya remained calm. She displayed another series of documents. Internal emails, board communications, meeting notes. The projector now revealed conversations that no resident had ever been meant to see. Messages mocked homeowners for harmless personal habits. One board member joked about a resident's daily jogging route. Another recommended increasing fines against homeowners, considered difficult because surveillance made enforcement easier. Several communications discussed monitoring individuals who questioned HOA decisions. Every document carried timestamps and administrator credentials. The evidence spoke for itself. Gasps echoed throughout the clubhouse. Neighbors stared toward the board members with expressions of shock and disappointment. Many had trusted these people for years. That trust was rapidly disappearing. Then Maya revealed the final piece of evidence: the proposed facial recognition expansion. The audience watched as plans appeared describing automatic behavioral analysis, resident movement tracking, and permanent searchable databases documenting daily activities. Richard insisted the technology represented the future of community security. But his explanation no longer carried authority. The room had already seen too much. At that moment, another unexpected figure entered the clubhouse. Calvin Mercer, the HOA's technology consultant, walked slowly toward the front. His presence surprised nearly everyone except Maya. Calvin explained that he had designed the original surveillance system with strict privacy protections. Those protections had been removed under direct instruction from HOA leadership. He admitted his own mistake. He had remained silent far too long. Fear of losing his career had prevented him from speaking sooner. But remaining silent had allowed the abuse to continue. He accepted responsibility for his part. His honesty strengthened the credibility of every document Maya had presented. One by one, other residents stood. Harold Simmons quietly described receiving warning letters simply for watching sunsets in memory of his late wife. A young mother explained how her children had been monitored while drawing with sidewalk chalk. The night shift nurse described repeated questions about visitors who brought groceries while she slept during daylight hours. The retired veteran recounted being fined after repairing his own fence. Each story sounded different, yet together they revealed the same pattern. The surveillance system had slowly transformed neighbors into subjects of observation. The room no longer resembled an HOA meeting. It resembled a community awakening. Several board members quietly lowered their heads. Others attempted to defend individual decisions. None denied the evidence. Richard finally stood once more. For the first time in years, certainty had vanished from his expression. He looked across the room at the residents he believed he had protected. Instead of admiration, he saw disappointment. He realized too late that authority without accountability always weakens itself. Before he could regain control of the meeting, several homeowners formally requested an immediate vote of no confidence. According to the HOA bylaws, residents possessed the legal authority to remove board members through a special community election. Hands rose throughout the room. Not a small majority. An overwhelming one. The vote passed. Richard Holloway's presidency ended that evening. Within days, the remaining board members resigned voluntarily. An independent investigation began shortly afterward. Outside legal experts reviewed every aspect of the surveillance program. Their findings confirmed Maya's evidence. Privacy protections had been systematically removed. Unauthorized monitoring had become routine. Data retention policies had been ignored. Behavioral profiling had exceeded every reasonable purpose of neighborhood security. The HOA faced significant legal consequences. Residents affected by the surveillance received formal apologies and financial restitution, funded through the association's insurance and reserve accounts. More importantly, the community committed itself to meaningful reform. A newly elected board adopted an entirely different philosophy. Security cameras remained only where genuinely necessary. Every camera location became publicly documented. Independent oversight committees reviewed all access requests. Automatic deletion policies prevented unnecessary data storage. Residents could review exactly how surveillance footage was used. Transparency replaced secrecy. Trust slowly returned. Maya declined repeated offers to join the new board. She believed her greatest contribution had already been made. Instead, she volunteered to help develop ethical technology policies for community organizations throughout the county. Her experience became an example for other neighborhoods considering similar surveillance systems. Technology itself had never been the enemy. Its misuse had been. Calvin Mercer continued working in cybersecurity, dedicating his career to designing privacy-focused security systems. He often spoke at conferences about the responsibility engineers carry when creating technology capable of observing people's lives. Harold Simmons returned each evening to his favorite park bench. This time, no warning letters arrived. Neighbors often joined him to watch the sunset. What had once been viewed as lingering unnecessarily became recognized as something far more valuable. Community. Months later, Oak Ridge Estates looked much the same from the outside. The homes remained beautiful. The lawns remained immaculate. Children still played in the parks. Families still gathered on front porches. The difference could not be measured by landscaping or property values. It could be felt. People smiled more easily. Neighbors introduced themselves instead of silently watching one another. Conversations replaced suspicion. Respect replaced unnecessary control. The cameras that remained quietly performed their intended purpose. They protected property. They no longer monitored lives. The greatest lesson the community learned had nothing to do with technology. Cameras can record behavior. They cannot measure character. Rules can maintain order. They cannot create trust. Only people can choose whether power becomes protection or control. Every invention reflects the values of those who use it. When compassion guides responsibility, technology strengthens communities. When fear replaces empathy, even the most advanced systems become instruments of injustice. Oak Ridge Estates had nearly forgotten that truth. One resident's courage reminded an entire neighborhood. Because real security is never built by watching everyone. It is built by respecting everyone. And in the end, the strongest communities are not those with the most cameras. They are the ones where trust never needs surveillance to survive.